Okay, Chad, we seem to have a lull in the entrance, so I think we're good to go.
Okay, thank you, Melinda, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'll call the order the 2020 Canadian Beef Checkoff AGM. Welcome everyone to our first ever virtual AGM. I'm the agency chair, Chad Ross, and I ranch with my family near Estevan, Saskatchewan. My co-chair for today will be Melinda Gurman. I'm really glad everyone can make it here online. Looks like we got a good turnout, and I'm hoping we're all getting a little more used to this way of having a meeting. So just a little bit of, first of all, I want to start out with introductions. We've got some special guests with us today. First of all, the Farm Products Council of Canada, Brian Douglas, the chair. We also have staff, Reg Millen. Thanks, gentlemen, for being here. From Farm Products, as we operate under the Federal Act, we support the Farm Products Council of Canada. They assist us with our regulatory framework. So good morning, gentlemen. We also, I believe we have Bob Lowe with CCA, the president of CCA. Welcome, Bob. We also have the chair of Veal Farmers of Ontario, Pascal Booley. Welcome, Pascal. We have our service providers here, representatives with our service providers who we'll have later in the agenda. Michael Young with Canada Beef, Andrea Brocklebank with Beef Cattle Research Council, and Amy Peck with Public and Stakeholder Engagement. Welcome. I'd also like to introduce the staff. Melinda Gurman, our General Manager and co-chair here today. Taylor Fraser, Manager and Partner Engagement. Thank you, Taylor. And Brad McCallum, he's our Agency Inspector. And Brad will be acting as our parliamentarian here today and assisting me if I need so. So moving on, make sure you have your AGM handbook available. All of our board and voting delegates would have received this in an email. You can find it on the AGM page under news on our website. Taylor's posting a link to that in the chat, so you'll be able to follow along with that. We have a few pieces of business to go through today before we can get to the report, so let's get all that squared away first. So if you're addressing the meeting, please state your name and association that you're representing here today. Please mute your line and turn off your camera if you're not speaking. It helps reduce background noise for the rest of us and the distractions, as well as it will increase the speed of your line. If you are speaking or asking a question, please unmute if you can and turn on your camera if you can, please. If you notice that your name is not listed correctly in the participants panel with your first and last name, you can update it by clicking on your name in the participants list and clicking rename. At this time, anyone that is called in only and are not connected online, can you please unmute your line and identify yourselves now? We need a record of anyone who is attending so we can account for quorum. So if you can please identify yourself if you are not online.
Bob DeBoer, Alberta Cattle Feeders Association Director.
Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Are you good, Taylor?
We do have one other online. They may be logged in online as well. I do have a 250 number if anybody wants to identify themselves from BC.
Oh, hi, Taylor.
Hi there.
Hi, sorry, this is Haley Rutherford from BC.
Great.
Had to unlock my mute.
Okay, thank you, Haley. Okay, so let's move along then. Voting on the motions. This is for registered delegates and board members only. Other participants are only observers. On each motion, we'll ask for movers and seconders, and then we'll call the question in reverse, asking for all opposed. I repeat, we will be calling the question in reverse today, and I'll be asking for those that are opposed. So when a question is called and you would like to vote, and you're voting in the negative, please unmute yourself, state your name and the organization, and cast your vote in the negative today. Okay, so we will be asking for all opposed. Does anyone have any questions about the voting procedures? Okay, moving on. I believe we had 108 registered. Looks like we got about 70 some participants here today, and I'd like to officially declare that we do have quorum. A full set of AGM rules can be viewed on page 7 of your AGM handbook. Okay, and just a point of clarity, only agency board, voting delegates, meeting chairs, and those invited to do so may address the meeting. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, let's move on to the agenda. Just a reminder, you'll not see our committee reports on this agenda, but full reports will be found in the AGM handbook. At this time, are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
Chad, it's Doug Sawyer. I would move the agenda.
Thank you. Doug Sawyer moves the agenda. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it. Russ Mallard.
Russ Mallard is a seconder. Discussion? 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 Hearing none, I will call the question. Anyone opposed? The motion has carried. Moving on to the minutes. We will now move to the approval of the 2019 AGM minutes. The minutes were circulated for your review in advance. And I would ask if anyone saw any errors or omissions to those 2019 AGM minutes. Hearing none, could someone please move to approve the 2019 minutes?
Jack Chafe will move.
Thank you. Jack Chave so moves. Is there a seconder?
Terry
Weatherby.
Larry Weatherby seconds. Discussion? Discussion? Discussion. We'll proceed to vote. Anyone opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, guys. Okay, we'll move on to item 3 in the agenda, and that is the chair report. So I'll go ahead and give my report at this time. I would now like to present the agency 2019-2020 annual report. Thanks again, everyone, for coming today. It's a new adventure for us to hold this meeting virtually. And I know we'll all miss the networking and social time that these meetings used to bring. We're slowly getting used to doing things a bit differently. As uncomfortable as some of this new technology is, it's certainly enabling us to be incredibly efficient. It's been a trying year for our industry and economy at home and around the world. Our industry has been impacted from both ends. Beef production and consumption have both seen dramatic shifts over the last 7 months. But our job as the agency hasn't changed. We continue to oversee checkoff and import levy investments on your behalf, cattle producers and industry stakeholders. Over the last 5 years, we've really found our stride in checkoff business rather than structure and governance issues. It's rewarding to know we're doing right by our country's beef producers. The agency continues to work closely with Farm Products Council of Canada on our regulatory framework and reporting. And we're so thankful to work with such positive and helpful team at the council. I want to thank the council's chair, Brian Douglas, and council staff, Reg Millen, for their ongoing support for what we do. Thanks, guys. We have seen unprecedented collaboration between industry stakeholders through COVID-19. And I am so proud to see everyone pulling in the same direction, representing our industry. Our research, marketing, and public and stakeholder engagement service providers have led the charge in flexibility and rapid response, and have worked together with other national and provincial associations to keep us pointed in the right direction. These service providers are led by some of the sharpest minds in the industry, and we're so lucky to have them guiding investments of checkoff and the import levy. Our new marketing structure is working as it was intended to. Independent of the agency board, but still under our oversight. Their sole function to manage the investment of marketing dollars allocated to Canada Beef, overseeing the programming with the best of the best in marketing. We are happy to report that things are ticking along and they've transitioned to the new structure very well. I have to extend a big thank you to our board and marketing committee for all the work you do and for representing producers and industry stakeholders. It is a big commitment to oversee financial investments, and you have a lot of people to answer to out there. But your dedication to doing what is right is so appreciated. I want to extend a big thank you also to the agency staff, Melinda and Taylor, for keeping us focused and moving forward. Both of these ladies are awesome at what they do, and it's really a pleasure to work with both of them. Thank you everyone for coming today, taking time out of your busy schedule to join us at our first virtual AGM. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kirk Jackson, who is our finance chair, for the introduction of our finance report. Turn it over to you, Kirk. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Welcome, everyone. So my name is Kirk Jackson. I'm your finance chair for the National Checkoff Agency. I've been on the NCO for a few years now. I think probably 7 years, close to 7 years, pushing 8. I own and operate a dairy farm here in Quebec, roughly 90 Holstein cows. We do some beef. All our cows are bred to Black Angus and now Limb Flex, and plus we market about 35 cull cows a year. I won't take up much of your time, as Laura and Melinda will bring you most of the financial report, but I did just want to mention a few key numbers with you that we can see here on the screen. So Taylor, if you're sharing that now. In 2019 and 2020, we had record revenues for both the checkoff and the import levy. A total of $17.6 million was invested through our service providers, 49% going directly to marketing, 34% to research, 12% to provincial investment, and 5% to public and stakeholder engagement. Melinda will take you through more detailed financial statements in here just a moment, but first I'd like to introduce Laura Rivero, partner at KPMG that provided our auditor's report. So I'd like to welcome you now, Laura.
Thank you very much. Sorry, it took me a second there to get my camera on. So my name is Laura Rivero. I'm a partner with KPMG. I have been working with the agency for 3 years now. So thank you for having me back again. I can confirm that we did issue our financial statements or the audit report on the financial statements for Canadian Beef Cattle Research, Market Development and Promotional Agency on June 25th. And that's for the March 31st, 2020 year end. Our audit report was an unqualified report, which means that everything was everything was presented fairly in all material respects in the financial statements. So there were a number of conversations had with management, and I would like to thank everyone for their time and effort this year. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Our audits are very complex and time consuming, and we appreciate all the work that KPMG puts in to ensure that we're doing what's right. I'm now going to turn it over to Melinda, and she'll take you through a more detailed look at the financial statements and move through her general manager's report. Welcome, Melinda.
Thanks, Kirk, and thanks, Laura, and thanks everyone also for being here today. I'm just going to wait here until I can have control of the screen, and I'm going to move into a somewhat thorough review of our audited financial statement for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. There we go. So you'll find this in our annual report, and I'm going to refer you to a few notes. And so flip back and forth, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through and highlight for you where the money came from and where the money went to. I'll highlight some of the significant changes that we've maybe seen over last year, as well as I want you to bear in mind that these financial statements are a combination of the agency and Canada Beef. And so I'll go through and provide you a breakdown where necessary, splitting out Canada Beef versus the checkoff agency. So to start with, we're going to look at our revenue coming in on our domestic checkoff. That's up over last year at 19.2 million, up about $900,000. Here in, I believe this is note 13, you will find a breakdown of the revenue by the provinces coming in. And basically revenue is up for all provinces over last year. So you'll see that 19.2 million at the bottom. You're also going to see the agency administration at 865,000. I just wanted to make a note there that the agency operates on an approved budget, and our budget was approved at 799,500 for the 1920 fiscal year. So we take off, as checkoff comes in, we take off a standard percentage at 5%, which does mean that sometimes we over collect on our administration by the year's end. When that happens, we return dollars. So this year we returned about $66,000 back to service providers or provinces as per allocations. On the next slide, we'll just have a quick look at import levy. That came in really consistent over last year. So our import levy is the collection on beef animals, beef or beef products coming into Canada. That's at $1 per head or weight equivalent. And as you can see, came in very close to last year at just over $1.1 million. Other income is at $156,000. That's up over last year, about $114,000. The reason for that is last year, some of that other income was used, put towards doubtful accounts from the 17-18 fiscal year. The 156 in the 1920 year, that really comes from, majority is bank interest, as well as a small amount of revenue from the Canadian Beef Centre of Excellence, a little bit of recovered checkoff from our inspection program, as well as a small subsidy, government subsidy that had to do with COVID. So that came in higher over last year. Here I want to break out the marketing revenue that came in. So once again, Canada Beef is part of the agency. Canada Beef does go out and leverage government dollars with the checkoff money that comes in. And so that came in at just over 1.5 million. So what we see here is the Government of Canada program, CAP, at 1.4 million, up slightly over last year. Amortized deferred capital contributions at 106,000, that's down over last year. What that is that was government funding that came in for infrastructure and capital when the Center of Excellence was built, and some of those monies annually get moved into revenue. So that's what those dollars are. Some new money secured this year. Canada Beef worked with the Government of Alberta on a new program, an export market development program. That revenue came in at just over 11,000. So as I mentioned, the marketing leverage dollars came in at 1.5 million. Overall, the revenue for the agency as a whole was just over $22 million for the 1920 fiscal year. So let's have a look now at where the money went. First, looking at agency operations, including board of directors. Board of directors is up at 227,000 this year. One of the things that I'll refer you now to is note 15. It's the note at the very back of the financial statements. This is an important one because it breaks out Canada Beef and the agency in terms of our expenses. The 227 is made up of the agency board of directors as well as the marketing committee, which oversees Canada Beef. Agency expenses came in very consistent with last year at around 181,000. The marketing committee expenses were up about $16,000 over last year. They came in at just over 46,000. So all in all, the board of directors and committee costs were at 227,000. Operations for the checkoff agency, a little bit higher than last year, came in at $491,000, about $42,000 up over last year, with some increased programming to meet regulatory requirements, as some other travel associated with some of our programs, like the inspection program. And I seem to have frozen, actually. Taylor, are you able to advance my slide, please?
Yeah, you bet. I'm not sure what's up, but you betcha.
It's all right. We can expect a little glitches here. Next, I want to go into the monies that were allocated to our service providers. So the agency has 3 functions that provinces allocate to. And on the next slide is going to be a bar graph that's going to show those allocations in the 1920 fiscal year. And I'm still not able to advance. There we go. Thank you. So this is 1920 allocations. All of the provinces provide these allocations to the agency, and then we allocate as per their wishes. There wasn't a big change in terms of allocations in the 1920 fiscal year over the 1819 year. Saw a small change in Ontario, where there was a decrease to what they were taking back in terms of provincial investment. We saw a shift in Nova Scotia, where they shifted a small percentage from marketing over to research. So when those monies come in, we allocate to our 3 functions: the marketing, research, issues management, as well as going over to provincial investment, where, as I mentioned, some provinces do take back a portion to invest into provincial programming. Taylor, can you advance to the next slide, please? Here, what we see is the public stakeholder engagement. This one's a tricky one, and so I'm going to just spend just a couple minutes here. The actual amount collected on public stakeholder engagement in the 1920 fiscal year is actually up over last year by about 67,000. Came in at about 808,000, 807. But what you're seeing on the screen is the monies that we transferred to CCA and the monies that Canada Beef spent. So you'll recall that public stakeholder engagement is actually a jointly administered program between CCA and Canada Beef. When PSE money comes in, we send 75% to CCA and 25% to Canada Beef. So what you're seeing here is about 606,000 was transferred to CCA for PSE work, and Canada Beef received 202,000. Of that, they spent 143,000. So the number you're seeing at 743 is the money sent to CCA as well as the money spent by Canada Beef on that initiative. Canada Beef carried over and is reinvesting about that 56,000 that was surplus over last year into this year's programming. Next slide, please, Taylor. Marketing, this is the money sent to Canada Beef. The generic beef marketing line is the import levy. Once again, that came in very consistent with last year. These are the monies that Canada Beef spent of the 1.1 million. They spent just over $1 million. Any surplus carried into this year for generic beef programming work. The branded programming is the checkoff monies that Canada Beef receives for their domestic and international programming. They received 8.4 million and spent 7.9. So that was up about 500,000 over last year in terms of the monies Canada Beef received for their branded programming work. Next slide, Taylor. Research is an easier one for us to explain because it's money that comes in minus administration money that goes out to BCRC. That came in up over last year about 260,000 at 5.8 million. Next slide, please, Taylor. Provincial investment are the monies, and I'll refer you once again to note 13, are the monies that some of the provinces do allocate back to themselves for investment provincially with national focus. Very consistent with last year's monies that were allocated back. And just a note there, any province that does allocate money back for provincial programming, they do have to report to us the same way that our national service providers report as well. And actually, Taylor, if you just flip to the next slide, we're gonna see note 13, and you'll see those distributions back to 6 provinces that are investing provincially. Next slide, please. The last one on this statement of operations I'll point to is the provincial portion of the federal levy. These are monies that go back to all provinces, very consistent over last year, up a little bit because we did see some increased marketings. And these are monies when cattle are traded outside of their home province. The monies come into us, the $1 or $2.50 is taken off for national programming, and then the remainder is returned to the provinces. Next slide, please, Taylor. And just the last point then on our statement of operations. What you see here is a surplus of 2.4 million for the agency overall. That's up over last year, about 760,000. Once again, that's a combination of surplus to the agency and Canada Beef. Of that 2.4 million, approximately 2.8, 2.3, closer to 2.3 is a surplus for Canada Beef. And the checkoff agency surplus was around 146,000. Next slide, please, Taylor. Lastly, this is the balance sheet, and I'll just go through this really quickly. So this is showing the health of the agency on a particular date, March 31st, 2020. And once again, it's the agency as a whole, including Canada Beef. And basically, it shows what we own and what we owe to other people. We see cash on hand up at 4.8 on March 31st. The internally restricted cash is a new line item where the agency board of directors made a decision for the agency to hold $3 million cash as a wind down emergency fund for both Canada Beef and the agency. Canada Beef holds $1 million of net assets for the same purchase, same purpose. So in total, for emergency or wind down, the organization holds $4 million. Accounts receivable are our monies owed to the agency, and I'll refer you to note 4 if you want to see the details there. This is mostly made up of checkoff and a little bit of government programming money that was to be coming into the agency. Accounts payable, note 6, I'll reference you there. That's the monies owed out on March 31st. Once again, that's mostly checkoff dollars that was needed to be allocated out. Lastly, if we just look at our net assets line, it shows the organization in a positive financial position on March 31st, 2020, at just over $11 million. So Kirk, that's a quick run through of our financial statements. I can stop there to see first if there's any questions regarding that, or I could move directly into the rest of my GM report.
Maybe we'll just see if there's any questions right now on the finances. Hearing none, I will have you continue on your manager's report.
Thanks, Kirk. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this year. We obviously are having fewer presentations, shorter presentations to keep a virtual meeting moving along. I want to highlight just a few things. First of all, acknowledging, once again, Kirk showed this percentage of where our dollars went when they came in minus administration. So one of the things I once again really want to point you to is our annual report, some of the other materials we have that highlights all the great work that our service providers have been doing. You know, it's a lot of money to manage, to oversee, to have the responsibility on, and those $20 million have been invested into some very significant programming in the last year. And I want to thank all of our service providers, not only for being great partners to work with, but also for the great programming that they've been providing. One of the things as I looked back on the last 4 years, I've been with the organization for 4 years, and one of the things I wanted to do is give a little bit of perspective about the change that we've seen in the last 4 years. And there's been a lot. When I came on, we had a very different structure, and we had some different programming, and I want to highlight a few of those things. First of all, one of the things I want to touch on is return on investment. And one of the things the agency's been involved in since 2016 is doing an analysis, a cost-benefit ratio analysis, or a return on investment study to look at what those investments are doing for producers, what kind of return we're seeing. The very first study was actually done in 2010. We call it the Cranfield study. That was the researcher that performed that work. And at that time, the cost-benefit ratio or the return on investment came in at 9-to-1. So for every $1 we were investing into national programming, we were seeing a $9 return. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of any of these studies today, but once again, I'll refer you to our website to have a look. We have the full study posted. We have Q&A posted so that hopefully if you have questions, it'll be able to address some of them. 2016, we committed then to do another study approximately every 5 years to look at the health of the checkoff system. 2016, the RUDE study showed the return on investment had increased to 14-to-1. And then in 2017, when we presented this at our annual general meeting, Import-Export had asked the question about the return on investment for the import levy, which was a great question. So in 2018, we redid the study and looked at what the return on investment was with checkoff dollars and the import levy. And that came in at 25-to-1. So over the last few years, we've seen a significant increase on return on investment for producers, which is great. We're looking at conducting another study in 2021, looking at starting that work late this winter. And it's going to be very interesting to see what we're going to find on our return on investment. Because even though we're seeing a positive ROI at 25-to-1, what this also tells us is that we continue to underinvest in some of these key areas in market development, promotion, and research. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the new study is going to tell us, because since 2018, we have had the checkoff increase. So I look forward to moving forward on that work in the near future. Next slide, Taylor. Next, I'm going to go through this really quickly. And once again, it's a bit of a retrospective then and now in terms of what we used to look like and what we look like now. We did a lot of work in terms of a structure. When I came on board, next slide, please, Taylor, thank you. When I came on board in 2016, we had a very different structure. We had a board of directors, which really was a Canada Beef board of directors because they had been operating that way since 2011. The provinces directed this change, and they really wanted to see separation between checkoff collection and remittance and oversight, and those using the checkoff dollars. So when I came on board, the checkoff agency wasn't necessarily an agency. We were a committee of the existing board of directors. The provinces continued to ask us for further separation between administration and marketing. And in 2018, we amended our bylaws and came up with the structure that we have now, where the checkoff agency is the board of directors. And, you know, I really have to commend the agency board of directors. It took a lot of culture change to move us to where we are today. And our board of directors really embraced that change and really drove that. And I think we're in a really solid place. So the checkoff agency has a variety of committees, including the marketing committee, which now oversees Canada Beef. And externally and internally, I think this structure has been working very well. And we've had a lot of positive comments about it. And I want to also just throw out a thank you to the marketing committee and the Canada Beef staff, Michael Young, for embracing that change as well and helping us move forward on that. And with that, Farm Products Council of Canada have been with us through it all. And Chad's already thanked them, and I want to throw a thank you out as well. They've been very supportive in terms of guiding us through this, keeping us on track, meeting our regulatory obligations. But also, as I said, being very supportive and very complimentary about the changes that we've embraced over the last 4 years. So thanks again to Brian and Reg for helping us along. One of the big things that's happened over the last 4 years is the checkoff increase. And that started off in 2017. It actually started off much earlier than that, as all of the provinces sat down and developed with the national organizations a national beef strategy. And to be able to fully implement that national beef strategy, it was determined that a checkoff increase was required. So the agency took that role on and worked with all of the provinces to move forward. And as of today, we have 8 out of the 9 provinces that have fully implemented the checkoff increase to $2.50. First out of the gate in 2017 was Nova Scotia. That started that off. So you see in this bar graph, a slow increase at that time in terms of revenue collected. Most of the provinces came on board in 1819, with the last two provinces signing on in June and July of 1819. So you'll see finally in the 1920 year where we have full implementation of those 8 provinces that moved to $2.50, showing that significant increase to revenue. The other thing that's happened that ties to this checkoff increase was the development of an inspection and audit program. And many of you are familiar with that now. We started working on this a couple years ago. It was tied to the checkoff increase in a way that when we started to go out and promote that increase, we had producers, auction marts, dealers talk to us about that increase, saying, understand what's happening, understand supporting and being able to fully implement the national strategy. One of the things people were asking for is to make sure it was a level playing field. And if I'm gonna pay that increase, or if I'm gonna remit that increase, let's make sure the folks down the road were doing it too. So we started to pilot this, and we piloted the program 2 years ago in the Maritime provinces, and last year we fully implemented it. And our primary goal with the inspection and compliance program is education. Education on the increase, education on the benefits of the national checkoff system, and education on how to collect and remit the national checkoff. We do go out and conduct physical field inspections where we actually have been recovering checkoff as well. But our primary focus, as I said, has been education and supporting our provincial partners in that. So that program's come a long way, and I think COVID slowed it down a bit in terms of physical field work, but I do see that one continuing on as well. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit of operations, and with that evolution of what we've seen the structure of the agency turn into, we can appreciate that we've had a change in terms of focus of where dollars internally are going as well. And this is something that we're really proud of as well. When we came on board, we put our heads to work thinking about what's our mandate. Our mandate is to collect, remit, and oversee national checkoff and work with our partners. So that meant a big shift in terms of how we allocate our time and our resources. And on the next slide, you're gonna see a bar graph. And one of the things that we really focused on is internal operations and how we go about business. And obviously from the 2015-16 year, which was prior the establishment of the agency as it is now, just gonna wait for that slide to catch up there. Thank you. And you're gonna see agency operations expenses increase, which makes sense. Really stabilized off in the last 2 years in terms of our agency operation expenses. One thing that happened was a significant decrease in board costs. We've actually, in the last 4 or 5 years, dropped our board costs by about 45%. The board's been really focused and dedicated to that to ensure that we're using dollars effectively and efficiently and doing the work that we need to do now in terms of administering checkoff. And of course, the yellow bars is the marketing committee, which really came into force in 1819, overseeing Canada Beef. And so you've seen that cost added and slightly increased in the last fiscal year. Another one that we've really looked at is just how we do business on other things. And on the next slide, you're going to see a pretty dramatic cost reduction. And that had to do with the annual general meeting, what we're having right now, and how it used to be as well. Pre the new system in 16-17, when I came on board, Canada Beef was meeting their mandate of marketing and promotion. They were also administering the checkoff. And the organization then was holding a 2-day forum. The costs were high to do that. And one of the things when we came on board was just to focus specifically on the administration of checkoff. And so we were able to significantly reduce our annual general meeting costs. The other great thing that happened around the same time was the establishment of the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, which we've been privileged to be able to hold our meeting just in front of that during that week, allowing us to open ourselves up, be transparent, and hopefully have more producers attend that session so they can see how their monies are spent. Obviously, our annual general meeting costs do fluctuate depending on the location of where we're at. And we're even projecting costs this year to be really low because of the virtual meeting that we're hosting as well. On the last slide, this is the closing out, and I'll turn it back over to Chad. On the last slide is just what's next for the next 4 years. I think the agency has really hit its stride, and you've heard us talk about that already today. We know what we're doing. We know how to do it. We're focused on collection and administration of checkoff and associated programming supporting checkoff in the provinces. And you're just going to see more of that. Structured reporting, we have regulatory obligations to meet, ensuring compliance and leveling the playing field for all, educating and supporting all stakeholders, including our provinces, strong communication and collaboration. Taylor does a great job. I have to throw a shout out to her. She does a great job staying connected with our provinces and communicating the benefits of checkoff. And of course, the board's very dedicated to our sound governance and administration. All of this can be found on our website if you want some more detail within our 5-year strategic plan. I'm going to close it out there, Chad, and turn it back over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Melinda. I appreciate that. And we'll go ahead and open it up for questions for both Melinda and Kirk. And Melinda, thank you for that update, and Kirk for on the financials, as well as the manager's report. And it sure is refreshing to see that how we've moved forward as checkoff collectors, and the amount of governance and structure work we've done in the past. And now we can get down to the business of collecting checkoff, and that is very, very exciting. So at this time, if you have a question, go ahead and unmute and ask your questions for Kirk or Melinda on the financials or the manager's report.
Hey, Chad, it's Ryan Casco from Alberta.
Okay, Ryan.
Thanks for the report. One thing that I didn't notice was a budget for going forward, and just noticing the reserves building and the excess revenue over expenses the last couple of years starting to build up. I just wondered what the plan is to spend that money, and especially if you can show that you're getting this return on investment. It would be nice to see that money leveraged. So can you comment on the plans for that surplus?
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Melinda, I'll turn that over to you.
For sure, and thanks for the question, Ryan. You know, for our service providers, those surpluses get rolled into their next fiscal year's business plans, which the agency does see. We don't comment on specific programming. We always comment on regulatory requirements and ensuring our service providers are spending dollars on what we're allowed to. In terms of the agency, we are starting to see a build of our operational surplus as well. And actually, Chad and I had a great conversation about that yesterday. We do have some ideas of what we're looking at doing. One of them is that return on investment study. Being able to fully fund that study and continue to monitor how well we're doing in terms of those investments done at the national level. Other options could be allocating out some of those monies as per the national strategy and sending out dollars to the service providers that the agency is sitting on to put to work for the benefit of the industry. You know, there's options also to look at what we're charging for a year for administration and making adjustments to that. We're very cognizant not to sit on too much money as the checkoff agency. We want to be sound and be solid in terms of making sure those dollars are being put to work for producers. One of the things I'm working on this year is a business continuation plan. And we need to make sure, number one, we have enough monies to cash flow ourselves in our first quarter of the year. Starting in April till June, remittances are low. So we need to have a small reserve to be able to cash flow ourselves. But also, what if we had border closures? What if we had no marketings? What does that mean in terms of viability of the agency? So we're right now in that process of doing an analysis, looking at what we need and looking at how do we make sure we get the dollars that are sitting in the bank to work as fast as we can. So I hope that answered your question, Ryan.
Okay, thanks, Melinda, and great question, Ryan. Are there any other questions out there? Okay, we'll have opportunity for questions later on in our resolution section. So I'll go ahead and move on if I don't hear any other people come forward here at this time. Thank you, Melinda and Kurt, for a great job there. Let's move on to the service provider Q&A. And this year, the reports from our service providers were presented in different ways to capture different audiences. Staff have directed our delegates to these reports over the last couple of weeks so that you've had the opportunity to review the materials. An interactive version of our annual reports include an overview of the programs as well as video updates from each of our organization's leaders. So if you haven't had a chance to have a look at that interactive annual report, I sure encourage you to do that. It's just great, and great job, Taylor and Melinda, on putting that together. In addition, the agency developed a full report in print, nice shiny print. I got mine today, and also a 1-hour online panel on investing checkoff dollars during a crisis. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that video, please do. Some of these reports provide a well-rounded idea of how checkoff dollars were invested. And I encourage you to utilize these back home in your home associations to your checkoff payers to show them how your checkoff dollars are invested. So we've invited the leaders of our service provider organizations here to answer any questions that you might have on checkoff funded programming from each of their areas. And it's my pleasure to welcome Michael Young from Canada Beef, Andrea Brocklebank from BCRC, and Amy Peck from Public and Stakeholder Engagement. If you have any questions at this time, please unmute yourself and ask the question, or put yourself in the queue by raising your hand and the hand icon, or you can type the question into the chat box to be answered live. So at this time, I'll ask for any questions.
Hi, Chad. It's Steve Christie here from Ontario.
Hi, Steve.
I've got a question for Michael Young.
Go ahead, Stephen. I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Michael. As you know, there's been such a huge shift in food service and in retail in the last 7 months. Canada Beef has done a great job remaining flexible in supporting the needs of those sectors. And just want to know what you see as permanent changes for Canada Beef's domestic or global programming as it relates to what is now called the new normal.
It's an excellent question. I wish I had my crystal ball here with me, but I will tell you that we're already working on next year's plan, which will be highly modified based on our previous year's plan. What we know, the basic categories will still be the same, but you know what you pointed out, the dramatic change within the retail and the food service channel. In some ways, they've blurred together in terms of takeout, HMR, home meal replacement, things like this. So we'll be creating a completely separate category, which is going to require a completely separate strategy to tackle that one. That category is exploding. It's growing in all directions. And according to every expert out there, it's here to stay. So even when things start to ease up on the food service side, everybody thinks that takeout, home delivery, and meal kits is here to stay. So it's a very important sector. We've got some tools that service it. We need much more. We want to ensure that Canadian beef is well represented in all of the categories. And that's going to take some development because we have some challenges in the beef category in terms of retherm and travel, portion cutting. There's some real challenges, and these haven't been done yet. So we're on the fast track to come up with a strategy and a working program, which will be fully integrated into the next investment plan. So it'll be a very important part moving forward. Other than that, as I mentioned, all categories will remain about the same. We'll just have modified tactics and investments that will be more pivoted towards how we can function in the new normal. And that applies to all the export markets as well. They're all at different levels. None of them are fully back to operations. And we've got everything from market access issues to problems, again, within the food service sector not coming back online. So it's a global challenge for us, but I'm happy to say that, we've got the team and we've got the investment and the support of stakeholders, and we'll get on top of this. I can promise you that, Steve.
Okay, thanks for the question, Steve. I just want to continue on, Michael. We had the discussion there yesterday about the Center of Excellence, and COVID has really brought some changes there as well, but I think there's some real positives that are coming about there.
Yeah, thank you, Chad. I think if, my father always used to say, never waste a good catastrophe. He said a lot of things like that. But anyway, I'm really happy to see that the center was able not just to repurpose or pivot, they literally reinvented themselves. You can imagine, we had a $500,000 investment in a beautiful facility that's fully designed for people to come and go. And all of a sudden it's dark. Now, one way you could say, if we don't do something, we've got the nicest coffee room in Canada, or we can put this to work and start getting a return on investment. And my hat's off to Mark Clausen, Matt and Cam for putting their heads together and rolling out a new video production services chapter to the Center of Excellence. These guys have completely converted that facility over. They're shooting video every single week. They've got well over 55 videos completed. So many that we had to create a new trade site called Canadian, so CDN beefperforms.ca. So we're creating so many trade resources that are video related. We had to create a separate website to house them. Now, not just are we doing this internally for general education and training, we've also extended it out to partners like meat packing plants who now have the same challenges we do. Whereas if they want to market their products, virtual or video product offerings are very important to them. So we've extended this out, and we're working with some of the packers on producing video and animated product sheets, marketing materials. We're working directly with retailers on doing videos for them. So it's quite exciting. There's quite a large list. Once the word kind of got out that we were up and running, it's been pretty busy. The guys have bought camera equipment. They're getting software. They're educating themselves into this new field. So, and I know this field is here to stay. So I think this is it's just a good success story for the beef industry. And believe me, these guys didn't miss a beat. They, as soon as I talked about it, literally I put it out there. If we don't find something for this facility to do, we're going to have to make some changes. And you know what? They jumped up really fast, and we're very proud of what they've accomplished and look forward to many things. We're also extending it to the export market. So we'll be doing some video. Actually, we're doing one set, which is quite interesting. We cover off everything that goes into every kilo of that piece of beef into the box in Canada. And then that box is then opened in another country, and a trained professional then does the cutting in another country. And that's all part of one video. We haven't finished that one yet. That's going to be our first one, but it's going to be awesome the way it's set up. So good question. Thanks, Chad.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Let's move on to our next question, please.
Yeah, it's Jeff Smith with Alberta. My question's for Amy. Amy, last year we saw a huge focus on sustainability in consumer marketing and telling our story of how producers are being stewards of the land. Do you find that the public stakeholders engagement has had to tell a different story the past 6 months or half a year, or are consumers still highly motivated on the sustainability story with what we've seen in the meat stores and possibly some thoughts or perceived views on shortages of meat in the retail shelves?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Jeff. I would say when the pandemic first hit in mid-March, sustainability wasn't top of mind for consumers. As we say, they were just looking to ensure that they had enough food at home if they needed to quarantine. And that's when we saw that real pandemic buying, which also was consumers voting with their wallets. And we saw in Canada and the US some of the alternative proteins being left behind while beef cases were being cleared out. So that was an interesting display of preferences. Now that we're, about 6 months into the pandemic, we're seeing continued interest in the story of sustainability. And so with people looking to agriculture to help be part of the economic relaunch of Canada, and we were so happy yesterday when Prime Minister Trudeau talked about farmers and ranchers being part of the solution towards climate change. So that really means that the message is being heard in Ottawa. And if it's being talked about in Ottawa, you can believe that there's been consumer or public pressure on the government to look at it that way. So really interesting. We did our first round of consumer research for the PSE program, and it was conducted in field July 2020. So sort of, after the pandemic, really looking at consumers' issues and views around beef. And what we saw is it rates really high on taste. 90% of people surveyed say they love beef and they love the taste of beef. Most were concerned about the environmental implications, perceived environmental implications. But when they learned our key messages around sustainability, it really improved their outlook on the industry. So the great news on the consumer research is that they care about our sustainability story still. And the largest concerns that they have about consuming Canadian beef matches up with the best story we have to tell. So we know that we have the stories and the facts and the climate change goals for the industry that is going to make anyone that has, a perceived concern about our industry will alleviate that. So we see it as still something very important to focus on, just in a slightly different way as we go forward. I hope that answers the question for you, Jeff.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Thanks, Jeff. Moving on, I believe we got a question from Trevor Welsh. Is that right, Trevor?
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Chad, and a great AGM so far. As good as you can make a virtual AGM, I guess, without the interaction. But anyway, everything's going smoothly. Enjoying it so far from New Brunswick. My question is for Andrea Brocklebank. We're still seeing some holdover of cattle destined for the packers since the plant closures across North America. What kind of uptake are you seeing now on some of the resources like feeding strategies, cost calculators for producers who are holding cattle back longer, perhaps even decided to hold them over the winter? Are they performing as well as you had expected as our industry looks to recover from these plant closures this spring?
Thanks for the question, Trevor. And yeah, when COVID hit, I mean, research is a bit different. We're kind of the long-term gain, but one of the areas we did see is questions around extension resources, especially as we did start to see some delays. Obviously looking at extended feeding strategies, those types of things. So we did produce kind of a newsletter blog on what we had already available. We haven't really added to that availability given we kind of had everything there that could answer a lot of the questions. To be honest, we've seen, we haven't seen huge extra uptake in terms of in the last while as we see a lot of the plants catch up. But I think the one interesting point, and maybe a side point I'll make, is obviously a lot of producers were already using our resources. We've seen continued growth every month in terms of the usership of the BCRC website, the blog, industry publications, taking our materials and moving them forward. That being said, I mean, COVID has meant that producers are also staying at home. We don't have the same extension workshops. We don't have those options to the same extent. So we definitely have seen a growth in inquiries from producers, but also from some of the extension partners that we have in terms of using those resources. And the great part about that is some of it's about using it, but it's also helped us better direct some of our plans moving forward in terms of adding to those resources. So one of the best examples there is actually we're launching into, I think it's going to start as a year-long process. I have a feeling it's going to grow from there. but focusing specifically on taking some of our decision-making cost of production tools and some of our resources and adding to our Eastern content, knowing a lot of our content focuses on where the majority of the herd is in Western Canada and recognizing that production system. But we want to make sure that we're supplementing that with stuff that supports producers in Eastern Canada as appropriate, knowing that their extension is struggling just the same as Western Canadian extension is. So with declines in available extension agents. So we are just launching that process and going to have a working group and then also a broader advisory group to assist us. And like I said, I started with a one-year plan, and the excitement of it tells me that we're probably going to have no end of opportunities in terms of growing that, working with our regional partners in the area. So those types of things are where I think we're just constantly looking to the industry to see where people are asking for information and where they're utilizing, especially the decision-making tools. Because one of the things we know with producers is it's one thing to produce a fact sheet or a topic page on a thing or on a topic like feed testing, but then giving them the tools and then also the economic decision-making tools to interpret, say, feed tests, but then determine how's it going to impact my operation by trying to support them in the economic decision-making process. So we're really trying to move down that continuum, and we've seen tremendous uptake as a result of that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrea and Trevor. I believe we do have a question in the chat box, so I'll turn it over to Taylor to ask that question.
Sure, thanks, Chad. We have a question for Michael Young. The question's from Devin Chersonoff from BC Industry Development Council out there in BC. Michael, the question is Canada Beef behind the new superfood push? So if you could answer that for Devin, that would be great.
Excellent question, Devin. And yes, I'm happy to say that all beef cuts actually fit Oxford's definition of what a superfood is. And we've already incorporated that messaging into some of the materials that we've developed since COVID hit. The first one we've done is what we call a ground beef toolbox. And in that, we do describe ground beef products as being a superfood, which is something that our plant-based competitors cannot claim. So yes, that's a great question. It is, it's one of those phrases that is now being picked up, and we are definitely going to use it as much as we possibly can to describe our products, because it does describe our products. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Michael and Devin. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, Chad, it's Jack Chafe here from Ontario.
Yes, Jack.
Yeah, I have a question for Michael. On the value of the exported beef, last year we're using that figure of it was adding around $600 per carcass processed back to the producer. Since COVID, have we lost some of that value on our export market, or have we been able to retain it, or where are we?
Well, that's a great question, Jack. Actually, if you saw the latest numbers in terms of volume, now the previous month we were down 14%. We're now down about 9% volume-wise, but on the value side, we're just down 2%. So each month we go through, we're starting to rebuild. Definitely on the value side. Now beef has gone up, obviously, the price, and that's affecting that. I don't have a number for last year. Mark is working on a revised breakdown of that contribution by primal cut, which will be one of our regular reporting formats, I think, moving forward. But to answer your question is, obviously volume has gone down. It's starting to come back. We've got some major challenges in China, obviously. So does the rest of the world. So our business there is down substantially. But China mainland is down 57%. Hong Kong is down 12%. So, we don't see that volume coming back anytime soon. Those who have the ability to export there are even thinking twice about taking the chance with how fast the political environment is changing there. They're not really treating some of their trading partners very well, and there are other markets out there that are looking for high quality protein. So some of the countries are sitting back and saying, you know, let's just let it ride it out and see what happens. So, but I hope that answered your question, Jack.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Any others? Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and say thank you to Andrea, Michael, and Amy for being here today in this open fire. It's great. Appreciate that. And feel free to visit their websites for more information. Links, Taylor's going to put the links up on the chat, or no, I see in an follow-up email will be the links if you want to get any more information. So with that, we'll move on to the elections portion of our agenda. And I'm going to turn that over to our General Manager, Melinda, who will take us through that.
Thanks, Chad. So for elections this year, we had positions for the checkoff agency as well as the marketing committee. And we had the nomination period open for several weeks, and what was submitted was one name per position. So we will not be having an election this year. What I'll do is I'll just quickly go through and introduce the folks that will be sitting in these seats. For the agency board of directors, we have producer representation. And there we have, sorry, I just need to move something out of my way. We have Jeff Smith with Alberta, Jack Chafe, Ontario, Chad Ross, Saskatchewan, Larry Weatherby, Nova Scotia, and David Francis, PEI, all returning members to the board, and we welcome them back. For CMC, we had 3 positions actually for this year. We have new to us this year is Andre Forget, was nominated through Canadian Meat Council. He's with Montpac. Mike Kennedy returning to us, he's from Cargill. And John Curtis, new to us as well, from St. Helens. We also have an importer-exporter representative, and returning to us is Coral Manastersky with Maple Leaf. And lastly, we have a temporary substitute annually nominated / elected for the retail food service position in the event that a retail food service position person cannot fulfill their commitments. And that person is Dennis Burrell, and he's with Cisco. So that's the agency board of directors. For the marketing committee, that committee is populated by our industry stakeholders from the agency, plus 2 producers from the agency board to oversee producer investment at marketing. Those 2 people are returning, Jack Chafe from Ontario, David Francis from PEI. Lastly, we have members at large that sit on the marketing committee that bring their substantial expertise to the marketing committee. And returning once again, we have Becky Bavacqua with McDonald's and Hubert Lau with Bix. At this time, I would now like to call for a motion to accept the nominees for the agency members and marketing committee members by acclamation. Can I have a mover, please?
Russ Mallard also move.
I heard Russ Mallard.
Yep, yes.
Thank you. And a seconder, please.
Larry Weatherby.
I heard Larry Weatherby. Thank you. Discussion. No discussion. I'll now call the question in reverse. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion's been carried. Chad, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Melinda, and welcome to our new board members to the board, and as well, welcome back our existing board members that are back again. It's been a pleasure working with you and looking forward to getting back to business, and hopefully we can get back together in a face-to-face meeting here soon. Moving on next, I'd like to, we have a member leaving our board, and Alex Fontaine has been a part of our board the last year and has been an engaged agency member representing the Canadian Meat Council. Alex has opted to step away from the board this year and focus on their growing veal business. But I just want to say thank you, Alex, for the work you did on the board last year. Alex was instrumental in the veal agreement, helping us understand the veal industry and to bring veal to part of our checkoff family here. So thanks for your work there, Alex. I really appreciated working with you on that. We're going to miss your passion, your insight of the veal industry, and look forward to working with Andre from Monpac as the new CMC representative. So on behalf of the agency, thank you, Alex, and there will be a token of our appreciation coming to you very soon. With that, we'll move on to number 8 in our agenda, resolutions. And I'd like to report there were no resolutions, delegate resolutions submitted to the 2020 AGM. And so since we do not have any resolutions, Linda and I and Taylor thought, well, let's just open up the floor to comments or questions for the board or for the staff in regards to checkoff. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself and go ahead and raise your hand. Jack?
Chad, it's Jack Chafe here from Ontario.
Yes, Jack.
As pointed out in Melinda's report there's 8 of the 9 provinces have moved to the 250 on the national checkoff, and the one that hasn't moved is Ontario. Just want to give some clarification on why we haven't moved on that. 3 years ago, we went into negotiation with our own producers here in Ontario to increase our own provincial checkoff by $1.50. We wanted to develop a regional marketing program. And so I guess not this past February, but the February before that, the checkoff did go through, the provincial checkoff. And at that time, we told our producers that that would be the only checkoff increase that we'd be asking them for in the near future. We haven't forgot about the national checkoff. There was some issues as we looked at the national checkoff increase. Some of them have been resolved, and just to let everybody know that we're still working with the national checkoff organization or agency on clearing up the other ones, and our door is open for discussion with them at any time. So I'll just leave it at that, Chad. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. I appreciate that, and it's healthy to keep the communication lines open between all of us, and so I'm happy that you did make those comments, and that we work towards that common goal. So appreciate that, and thank you. Are there any other questions here from our delegates?
This is Mary. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Mary.
I didn't have a question. I just had a comment. I think I would really like to show my appreciation to both the staff and you, Chad, and also our service providers. Like the way they've adapted to this situation we're in right now has been wonderful, and I think it's like the resources that we have available now that we can share and that people can have are just unbelievable. And because especially as being beef producers, not everybody gets out to different things or stuff like that. Having those extra resources available is phenomenal. So I just would like to thank everyone for what they're doing.
Thanks, Mary, and I echo your comments completely. You betcha. Thanks so much. Questions? Comments? Okay. Last chance for any everyone being on here today. And before we move to adjournment, a few house cleaning items. There's a survey in the back of the AGM handbook, but also sent in a follow-up email for your feedback. It's important to us, so if you can do that, that'd be great. There's going to be a board of directors meeting immediately following this one. Please click on your link in your calendar invite or the board meeting link on the agenda, or Taylor can help you find it. I know she does for me. So again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Appreciate that. And I guess we've completed our entire agenda. So all I need is a motion without a seconder for adjournment.
Mary.
Okay, Mary adjourns the meeting. Thank you, Mary. All right, everyone take care, stay healthy, and we will see you down the road.